Historically, you may know that a rabbi only gave 2 sermons a year. One was Shabbat Shuvah in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the other, Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat before Pesach. We are here. But I have an out, because if you look at Jewish law in the Mishnah Brura, it says that if Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat when the rabbi would give the sermon, falls on Erev Pesach, right, which is today, then that sermon should be given the week before. So thank you to Rabbi Guzik for her words last week. They were beautiful. And so instead of giving that grand sermon, I want to investigate some of the halachot, the Jewish laws that we all experienced these last few days, that if you were like us, were pretty confusing. And one of them that I want to speak about is called Bitul Chametz. It's the nullification of Chametz, because as I look at the clock at 10:53 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, it's happening at this moment. This year, all of the pre-Passover laws were confusing. I'm going to go, this is sort of like a news broadcast, replay the news of the last few days, and hopefully you'll have a moment and say, aha. Fast of the firstborn. Any firstborns here? When should it have been? Today. We know it was Thursday. Why was it Thursday? Because you can't fast on Shabbat. You can't fast on Friday. There's only one, which is the 10th of Tevet, that you do fast on Friday, and so it's pushed back to Thursday. Burning of the chametz. When should that have been? Today, right after the fast of the firstborn. But you can't light a fire on Shabbat, so it's postponed or was pushed back to when? Yesterday. But can we eat chametz yesterday? Raise your hand if you had some type of chametz for dinner last night. Okay. So what don't we do? We didn't say the declaration for nullifying the chametz, but we did burn it. Bidikat chametz, searching for the chametz. It should have been yesterday. When was it? Thursday night. Got it? Don't worry, the cantor showed us in the staff meeting this week a calendar, a Jewish calendar, and this won't happen for another 20 years. Right? 2042. So we're all set. What about today? What are you going to eat? If you look right here, the challah has not risen. But there's something different, and we'll explain in a minute. The rabbis go into what we should eat today. In fact, what we should eat last night. The Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish law code, says that last night you should not have made, they say, a cholent, a hot stew. Why? Because they know there's going to be chametz in the stew. And what do you have to do when there's chametz in the stew? You have to clean the pot, and it's tough to clean the pot on Shabbat, so don't do it. But the rabbis say, we know you're going to do it anyway. So it gives the reason of why or how you should clean the pot. And then it goes to this morning. What you should do for the commanded meal of this Shabbat. And it says, look, we know you can still have chametz, which was about 20 minutes ago, if you had an early davening, an early service. So what you should do, you should just wipe off the plate, literally it says, with your hands and put it back with the dishes of the chametz. The rabbis understood the reality of what we were going to do. And finally, we are commanded to have 3 meals on Shabbat, Seudah Shlishit. Now we're in big trouble. Because if right now, literally right now, at about 11 a.m., we cannot have chametz, now you say the declaration for nullifying the chametz, but you can't have matzah until you have the Seder tonight. What do you do when you leave the sanctuary? Any guesses or any answers? There we go. Egg matzah, or in the halachic term, matzah ashira. Rich people's matzah, meaning not just the flour and water. So under this cover, we hope we have some rich matzah. What I'm trying to tell you is, us Jews take chametz very seriously. I can tell you by the amount of questions that the clergy got this week, you all take this mitzvah very seriously. You can't just sell it, and you can't just burn it, and you can't just nullify it, but you in fact have to do each one of these. However, in the Talmud, it does not give us the declaration that we read today of nullifying the chametz, in the Babylonian Talmud that is, but rather it says it should be a thought process. In order to nullify the chametz, it should just be something that you're thinking about in your mind. And Nachmanides, a Middle Ages commentator of the Torah, he explains that we are not nullifying the ownership of the chametz, which is what we do, by the way, on Thursday morning when we filled out the form with Jay Harwood and sold our chametz, but rather the important thing is to disconnect. We are disconnecting from the idea of chametz. Not the actual crumbs that you may find, but the idea of chametz. And this, I believe, is the slight difference that makes it crucial to what we do tonight. It says that we are not responsible for even what we see, and we have no concern of this chametz. In fact, the rabbis asked, what if you didn't sell the chametz? And it's today, it's Shabbat. They said, don't worry, don't sell, but literally take all your chametz and give it to somebody who is not Jewish and hope that they will give it back to you after the holiday, and even so, give them the key to where that room is. I believe Nachmanides' definition is a definition that we can all take for this year's Passover in particular. He is saying, the chametz, even if we see it in front of our eyes, it's as if it does not exist. We all know that Pesach does not fall out of thin air. 30 days before we were celebrating Purim, when we thought we have a month. But it creeps up and here it is. And Nachmanides is stressing that it is the work itself that getting to Pesach takes that is as important as the destination of getting to where we are tonight when we sit around the Seder table. In the beautiful new-ish Haggadah, the Koran Haggadah with commentary by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, he talks about Passover being an inheritance for the future generations. But he says there are two different types of inheritance. The first, he says, is a nachala. A nachala is an inheritance which comes from the root word of nachal, which means a stream. And just as water naturally flows down a stream, our Jewish inheritance flows from generation to generation. We don't do anything to get it, we are just given it. But he says that is not the inheritance of what we do on Pesach. Rather, he says there is a different type of inheritance. In Hebrew that's called a Yerusha. It also means inheritance. It is the same thing. But the difference is a Yerusha you have to work for. You're not just handed it. You have to work for it. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch explains that when we receive an inheritance by working for it, it is much more secure than a nachala, an inheritance that we are simply handed. Tonight, when the youngest child asks the Manish Tana the 4 questions, this is the beginning of a Yerusha, an inheritance that doesn't come simply by giving it to them, but it comes because they work for it. It comes not by answering questions, but it comes by asking. And it is this Yerusha, this inheritance that we work for, that has a better chance of being passed down l'dor v'dor from generation to generation. This year, with all of these strange laws that I just listed that we all participated in, we all took them very seriously. One question that I got from somebody a couple of days ago, they said, if the fast of the firstborn is on Thursday, and usually I don't eat anything after breakfast until the Seder to be hungry, does that mean, Rabbi, that I have to fast for the 2 days because Passover is on Saturday? We were all confused, but we were working at it. We were working at it and not simply having it handed down to us. On Thursday night, we searched for chametz. We turned off our lights in our home and we used a candle. We used a feather instead of a Dyson dustbuster. And we said the ancient blessing instead of magic words. When we did that, our children began to ask the questions. They looked at us and they said, why are we cleaning differently tonight than we do all other nights? I smiled at them and I thought, they get it. It will not be a nachala, but this is the beginning of the Yerusha, the inheritance of tradition by asking questions and working at it. Tonight we are about to take out our Haggadot. We will sing our favorite songs and tell the stories of our people and our families. We feel like we have arrived, but there is still so much work to do. For as hard as we worked this past week in ridding our homes of the chametz, my prayer is that we work equally as hard to ensure that when our stories are told tonight and tomorrow night and beyond, that they are part of the Yerusha. They are part of the inheritance that should never be taken for granted. Yes, it is such hard work, but it is so, so worth it. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach this evening.